So the decals have now been applied on this kit, and I'm pleased to say that despite its age, 2000 release, so we're 2019 now, so 18, 19 years old, they've gone on exceptionally well, no problem. They were a little bit delicate. That wasn't due to the age, that's just the type of decal compared to, say, an Airfix decal, which can be a little bit stiff, and like Tamiya decals, etc. These are quite the opposite, very thin, not really fragile. They've gone on very nice, sunk into the panel lines. If we take this pat bit, it actually went into the panel lines just using the micro sole, which was nice. And then just to get them down a little bit further, because it was coming through a little bit vague, I've just with a tip of a pin poked through the rivet holes and then run through the panel line through the decal, and that's just finally bed it in. This is now had a gloss coat and we're ready for the weathering. I do need to paint the gun barrel, which I've replaced purely because I snapped off the plastic one, and I've already hit this and bent it. But this is just Albion alloys. That is, I don't know what the mil is. I think it's about 6 mil or 8 mil with a 5. I think it's 8 mil with a 5 mil piece just in the tip, just to give the end of the cannon. And also done the pitot tube as well, which is a bit keen, putting that on as early as this, through the same method. All that fell off in the decaling stage was the doors for the nose gear, so I'll leave those off for this stage. Now I think we'll start with the chipping, then panel line washes, then give it a matte coat, and then work into the oils to try and fade back some of this paint. So we've got quite a strong dark earth colour here, which has been a little bit bleached, and the dark green certainly bleached out a little bit. So we're going to work on that a bit more, try and give some definition to the panels and try and break it up. Get quite dusty, get a bit muddy on the undercarriage, sorry, and the landing gear, and using a few pictures that I've got, just try and work towards what the real subject looked like. So pretty much all of that I'll be able to do without waffling on, so enjoy the rest of the video. So I've just got some thinners here and a little a lid, which I find quite useful. I'm just going to liven up some of these old oils here. I wouldn't suggest using old oils, and you may wonder why I'm doing it, and because I'm a bit lazy. Some of these might be past it, so I might get a squeeze out the tube, but there's a bit of raw umber here I'm trying to liven up, and I've got going. So what you want to avoid, not that this is a tutorial, but what I'm trying to avoid, I suppose, is graininess, and I've had a little bit of that with the white that I put on because I'm using cheap oils. I would advise, if you are just starting out in oils, or if you have the same problem, the Abteilung, or similar name, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, they're black, and they're based for modelling. I think one of the companies, AK or someone like that, is doing them, and they're very high quality. You don't get any sort of graininess. They've got a much better I don't know what it would be, the pigment's better, I suppose, or more appropriate, but whatever it is, they work very well, so I am due to invest in a set of those. So all I'm going to do here, I have done panel lines, and now I have done a bit of a dust layer, like I said, and a bit of a fading, so I'm just going to try and now give some depth in places. So often I put a bit of oil on and then I take it off if I don't like the look of it, and so on and so forth, but all I'm trying to do is just break it up really, not have any uniformity. I use cotton swabs, or I use quite wide brushes as well, and I'm trusting the undercarriage here, but that's never usually a good thing. Set it quite firm on my hand like this and get everything out of the way. And then if we go over with one of these wide brushes, you should see it's quite wet there, and this will just fade it in a little bit and blend it all the way through, and you'll start to cut through some of the lighter colour that I've got. So I need to think about these panels. So some of these are fuel, I think, that yellow one there, so we want to get a bit darker staining around that. And I've got some of these as well, so you've got engine oil from MIG, I've got some MIG washes, some AK washes. It's all relatively the same thing, they're just enamel washers I think. They work quite well with these enamel thinners. That will thin them down and it will help them run, and it all blend together. So I don't tend to put coats between the two things now. Now we're on the matte coat, we'll kind of work together and get it all blended in. I don't tend to worry about separating the two. I've locked the panel line wash in with a gloss coat, and now we'll just see where we get really. It tends to give a nice effect letting it all blend together, I find. So I don't tend to worry too much. So here we have got raw umber, like I've said, so that's just a kind of nice dark colour. So I'm going to put this around this panel where the fuel is. This isn't fuel staining at all, but it's just the start of it, like I've just said. So we try and drag that a bit with the cotton bud, just sort of airflow direction, and then with the brush again. I don't worry about it going at the front like that, just kind of, because what you got to think, although maybe these weren't stained, you know, they wouldn't leave a great big oil stain there and let it fly off. I mean, I'm sure it happened, but they would have wiped it off with a rag, and that's going to still cause a sort of difference in the tone, and it's going to build up. I'm not sure how long these this particular aircraft lasted, but let's say it lasted a bit longer than it had a few flights. So I think I might jump on with one of these washes here. So I'll use this streaking effects from Ammo, and these are quite good if you want funny enough streaks, and I just it's good to put on a sort of thin line like that, and you want to let this dry up a little bit, not too much. You can always go back over with thinners and put a bit around some of these hatches here as well, and we'll drag that in a minute. So when that dries up a little bit, you can then drag it with a stiffer brush and it will give you the streaking effect. If you do it straight away, it tends to just wipe it off. So I like to put a bit just around some of these panels, and then I'll mix it up in a minute with some of the engine oil, and then we've got a dust panel line wash as well, which we won't actually be using strictly as a panel line wash, just trying to highlight some areas to show a bit of dust. And there I am putting that enamel thinner into the spirits here that are thinning the oils, and that's clean the brush. So don't want to let it dry up too much, and always put it back on again. So let's see what happens if we start hitting this like that. Get a bit of dragging, and then that'll it'll dry now. It's a bit thinner, and then once you've got it dragged a bit like that, you can then go across, and that takes off the most of it, and that gives you the sort of faded effect of a oil stain. So it seems counterproductive going across it, but that's how you get it. That's the feathering that it tells you to do. So you want to drag it first to get the line that you want, and then just go across. Now, because I've done that and it was quite dry, that's meant that a lot of it's rubbed off, which is what I wanted. I'm just hinting at it at the minute, and all I can see here, it might not come across on camera, but I can already see we've got darker areas here all around where the fuel canisters are. Where the fuel caps are, where the access is for it, and that's what I want. So I'm going to continue doing this sort of thing, go over with a few more different colours of oils, probably attack the greens with I've got a green oil paint here which I might use just to try and brighten some areas, show where it's been sort of polished. It's still a bit heavy here with the white that I use, so I might go over that with some thinners. You can also use some of these, this is one of the Flory weathering sticks for sort of sanding paint. That's very useful for just cutting through, because it's got a very soft velvety side, and that will cut through some of these dry oils and then give you get you sort of back towards the gloss coat, so you can go back down through it a little bit, cut into it if it has dried up and the thinners are making it stick, and you don't want to, if you put thinners on, it tends to wash a large area. So I'll continue with this. So here, just using a bit of the Pacific dust. Now I'm not actually trying to do a panel line wash, I'm just trying to pick out a few areas in panels just to give it some variability, so it's not all dark, so there's like a bit of dust got in there. And then once that's drying, then we'll try and work it off and use that dust. So you've got it here, I don't know, where are we? Let's just see it here on the aileron up here, where it's gone in and then it's gone in and then it's sort of been bled out a little bit, and it's on the wing here. So just with some neat thinners, just going to try and liven that up a bit. And instead of having it pooling like it is just here, actually get it to drag off of the wing, so it gives it a bit more like continuity, I suppose. It sort of doesn't just end, it goes across the whole thing like it would. You don't just, doesn't just tend to pile up these sort of dust effects. It's very personal, these things. I think it's what you're looking for. You know, there's no way to say how it's meant to look. It just all of a sudden it starts to look right, and then you're happy with it. You just keep going, and then if you're not happy, like I said, you can rip it all off with some thinners. Now I'm obviously pulling it out of the panel line here. I'm well aware of that, because it's not dry, and that's what I'm trying to do. You don't have to. You can let it dry in the panel line, just leave it in there, or you can drag it out, or whatever. So it really is perfect, these sort of mediums for weathering. It's there's so much potential to them. There's so much you can do, and they're very forgiving as well. And this is all on top of a matte coat, so it's biting quite nicely, which is just what I wanted. So this is always find these a lot better on matte coats. I tend to just leave a gloss coat for filters if I want to get uniform coverage all over the airframe, and panel line washes, initial ones, to give you the depth, because they tend to run on quite nicely. And now, you know, I wouldn't want this dust to actually run all the way through. I'm just loosening it up here on this protectless walkway here. I've decided I'm going to chip these. I said before I wasn't, but after looking at a little bit of reference, I am just going to come down lightly through here and just take some nicks out of it, concentrating like I have here. I'm going to leave that. I'm very happy with that. I think that's quite nice. And going over this with these oils as well will subdue that a little bit, because it don't want to be too bright. It is bare metal, but it, you know, it will have been, again, patina I suppose is the word. It will have had dust and everything over it, so it's not going to shine bright like a piece of polished metal would. These are wall planes. So I thought I'd just explain what I'm doing there, so I'll leave you now with a bit more sped up stuff and get the music back on. I saw some reference online, not of this aircraft, of another aircraft, and I thought, oh yes, where the sort of panel lines stain through, not panel lines, where the oil sort of stains panel lines around dust. So I've just sort of gone over doing that, so you can see it here. So where this is black on the shark's mouth, firstly I've used a lighter wash in there, so it's caught some of the dust, but if you can see here, you've got the pigment, and then it's sort of been cut through where whatever, you know, there's been rain or it's got wet or fuel or oil or something like that. And I've just kind of gone through here doing that, as you may be able to see, and all along here, and it just dirties up the airframe. Here you can see around this panel what I'm talking about, and it just cuts through and leaves it sort of like not glossy, but it looks stained. So I've just kind of done that, picking out panels. It doesn't really matter whether they're oil panels or fuel panels or anything like that, because there would be general sort of wear and tear. Whether this is historically accurate, I wouldn't like to say, but I've only got a few blurry pictures, so I'm just trying to make the best of it, and I thought I'd go down this route. And there you can see into the cockpit, and we got some of the chipping, and I've just tried to, all around the door frame, just keep some of the weathering that's happening here there, so where hands would be going in and grabbing to get inside, and carried it on into the cockpit floor there as well. Again, continuity, it's meant to continue all the way through, it's meant to look the same because it's exposed to the same conditions. So I think we're getting somewhere near it now. I've also done the underside and kept that more sort of for dust, with the staining from the dusty area. I'm sort of thinking about this one being, as it arrives, they're in the sort of New Guinea area, I think. It quickly got very, very muddy, and there's some pictures where they've taken the, I don't know what that would be called, the guard here, I suppose, for the landing gear. That's taken off, like they did with Fokker walls and stuff like that later in the war. You saw done as well, so it's just that little bit showing, and that's obviously because it's getting very muddy. So I've tried to do it as a sort of dry conditions before it starts to get wet. Presumably it got to the rainy season over in that theatre, and then it all got bogged up. So I think that's looking pretty good. I did attach the doors, but one's fallen off in the process, so I haven't bothered attaching that back yet. So I think next off I've just got to sort out the guns and the exhausts, and then I think we're somewhere near it. So I'll get all of that attached, and then we'll take stock of where it's looking, what it's looking like after that, and then decide whether I want to go any further into it. Okay, and here we are complete. So there's a few stages you didn't see on camera for numerous reasons, mainly because they're a little bit fiddly and it was hard to film. So the final thing I've done is put the exhaust stains on, which are quite heavy, but that's the state of the aircraft. That's what the references are, so I've just gone exactly by them to get the pattern. So hopefully you can see there, this is what we're talking about, so the exhaust stains coming down here, and that is almost exactly what the pattern's like. Obviously it's a little bit of give and take. So I was using the MRP exhaust soot, but it was a little bit too thin, so I added some rubber black to it and then went over with neat exhaust afterwards. So pretty pleased with the way it's turned out overall. It is quite dusty and quite well weathered, but again, that's the state of the aircraft, so I just sort of tried to replicate that. Quite pleased with the build. A little bit heavy-handed in places towards the end, which is a little bit of a pain, but I feel like with this one and the Spitfire, I've learnt a lot and come on quite a way, so that's one good thing. So I can always progress from this. That's the hope. So hopefully each build will get better as we go on. So I have added some chipping up along the walkways there, like I said I would, and then just kind of brought everything in with some neat oils and stuff. The main work on the exhausts was done with pastels, which you saw before, and actually bringing in that white. So the three pastels I found worked very well was the black, the brown and the white, and then bringing the white back through towards the end to try and give that feel of, I don't know what it would be called, but you get that on sort of exhausts and stuff. It's like heat staining of the metal. It's sort of more than charcoal, it's like burning the metal, so I'm quite pleased with that. I had to clean the windscreen off a little bit on the inside. I had some overspray, but that was no problem. Just went over with some Tamiya thinner on a cotton bud, just rubbed it around and that picked most of it off. So I've got some pictures to come up next. I do feel as though they're the best pictures I've ever taken of any aircraft, model aircraft, so hopefully you'll agree. So that's getting better. It's just about getting more light and learning the settings of exposure and things like that. I've also managed to work out with the video having exposure and more light and stuff, so hopefully that should help going forward. And all there's left to say is if you enjoyed what you've seen and you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, leave a comment down below, like the video, and stay tuned because there's much more coming to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.